Good afternoon. It's Friday, February 14th, 3 p.m. Happy Valentine's Day, everyone. I'm calling to order the ZBA meeting for February. And our first order of business is the Pledge of Allegiance. So please join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I don't know about that. I'm gonna say. I hope it's the case. I'm not sure.
Let's work on that one.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Okay, so have the members of the board had the opportunity to review last month's minutes? It's actually the November minutes because we didn't have any meeting in December and January. So yes,
Yes.
we hear a motion to accept those minutes.
I'll make a motion.
A second. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
The minutes have been adopted. There is no old business, so we will turn right to the new business, which is the application of Paul and Melissa Keary pertaining to 583 Hedges Lane. It's application 1 of 2025. It's for an area variance for a rear yard setback and rear yard lot coverage. And for the applicant, we have
Carl Pentecostal, 860 Montauk Highway, Watermore, New York. Good afternoon, everybody.
Everybody knows, Mr. Benacasa gave me the affidavits of mailing and posting.
okay.
So what we're dealing with here is a case of slight builder's error. We were working within pre-existing non-conforming setbacks for that tennis court. Specifically an accessory structure rear yard setback of 43.5 was the pre-existing setback. The old tennis court was picked up, the new one put in, and due to a slight error, the current existing tennis court is 42.3, again, we're 43.5, was permitted by pre-existing non-conformity. So essentially, we are asking for a reduction or a relief of rear yard setback of 1.2 feet or 6%.
Your lane's like 195 with direct service.
Wait, somebody's on an airplane flight, direct service to Honolulu. Who's listening?
Was that anything? How was that? Somebody getting a clearance?
That's it.
The only one,
Sorry about that.
somebody muted themselves.
Okay. You can resume.
Thank you. So, again, just to note this, due to a builder's error, a 1.2 feet in relief from the pre-existing non-conforming setback of 43.5 feet.
So we got three numbers. I want to be clear that I understand this. The setback, the pre-existing setback that was 45 feet. 43.5 feet. And you now want to increase the encroachment by another
1.2 feet.
1.2 feet because of the builder's error.
That's right. Then, in addition to the setback relief for accessory rear yard, the court creates, as a result again of that error, an increase in lot coverage of 102 square feet or 0.6% of what's permitted in rear yard lot coverage. So 20.6% in rear yard lot coverage, which 20% is permitted by code. Again, this increase was caused by that extension of the tennis court in error. We've looked into removing that extension. It exceeds $30,000 to do that, which is a significant amount of money, and that is essentially the benefit that weighing in favor of the applicant here when juxtaposed with the detriment to the area. I would note there are 14 tennis courts in the surrounding area with an average rear yard setback of 38.7 feet. Again, that's less than the requested setback. Of those 14 tennis courts, 8 of them have a setback less than what is required. In 2024, this board granted a variance to 172 Town Line Road to allow a pool house to an accessory rear yard setback of 21.7 where 30 feet is required, that's relief of 27.7%. Again, we are asking for 6% relief. Turning to the 5-part test, will this cause an undesirable change in the neighborhood? No, as mentioned, tennis courts. The tennis court is a pre-existing nonconformity. When we finished, the building extended the court to the south by 1.2 feet. Tennis courts, especially those within what our permitted setbacks, are not uncommon in the neighborhood, as we mentioned. The benefits cannot be sought feasibly by some other means. This was an error, it exists. We have to deal with it, and the cost to remove it would exceed $30,000, specifically $33,572. Is it substantial? No, the relief requested is 0.6% as it relates to rear yard coverage, and 6% for the lot line increase. 6% for the rear yard lot line. Will it cause an adverse effect on the environment or the neighborhood? This property has already been developed. There's already been a tennis court there. The change in setback and lot coverage is de minimis, so it would not. And again, the reasons for this application are not self-created. It was a builder's error. So with that, I'll entertain any questions from the board.
Anybody have any questions? All right, well,
I-
go ahead.
Well, it might be the same question you had. I'm just looking at the survey. There's a line that says dirt and a line that says chain link, and it seems like the dirt would be back at that, just based on the scale here, that
Yeah,
the dirt, yeah.
this is a representative from the owner's builder's rep.
I'm builder trap on this.
Say your name.
Your name?
Timothy Dollar. No. First off, I just want to correct, the original survey shows 0.3% is the excess in the rear yard coverage. I think you multiply the number, it's 0.3%, not 6%.
Well, that's no, I'm talking, that was the setback, not the.
Okay, but, and what essentially happened here is everything followed the pre-existing tennis court. And there were sets of posts in for the net. And then what happened is they went ahead and trimmed the court to its original size, which would have been the non-conforming. What was the error was they didn't think about putting that granite perimeter around. That granite perimeter is a $39,000 perimeter. And it's very, very expensive. And that's how this came to be there. What I believe that you might be referring to for the dirt is the surveyor, when he resurveyed for the as-built to be submitted to the village, he claimed, he said that we could become legal for lot coverage if it wasn't pervious. It would have to be impervious. So we went ahead, not mentioned by the attorney here, that we went ahead and spent almost $11,000 to take and cut a 3-foot swath out and make it pervious. After we did that and we submitted to the building department, John noted that he was he contested that. We're not making an issue about that. We were led wrong by our surveyor. So now, as Mr. Van Kessel is doing, it's just better to, we're gonna lose that money, we're trying to do that, and let's just see if we can get the other 1.2 feet.
The granite perimeter though goes out to where the paved impervious area was.
No, we created a pervious area inside the.
Yes.
So the chain link fence is actually the boundary of the
And-
tennis court and.
And the piece of granite,
And if the lot coverage portions were
no
removed,
lot coverage portion.
but the building inspector did not interpret that to relieve us of our lot coverage
Got it.
responsibilities.
But when you were talking about a perimeter wall or something of masonry, weren't you, or am I mistaken?
No,
What
the only perimeter wall you have there is the one that follows the contour of the bank. And there's an enclosed,
That's the stone retaining wall, but, okay, then I misunderstood. I had the impression that where the chain link fence was at the rear of the property, there was an enclosure of the court, but it's not. So the theory was that by cutting back the concrete where the dirt is shown, if you move just the chain link fence up to that,
if we, well, the way the building inspector is interpreting it, we'd have to turn around and move the chain link fence, take out all the granite, move the granite back because he wants.
what granite are we talking about?
Around the entire court is a 1 foot by 2 inch thick.
That's what I was asking about.
Yes.
And I thought you said that the only masonry was this retaining wall following the terrain. So the granite surround of the tennis court, where is that located on the rear side of the property? Is it where the chain link fence is?
Yes, the chain link fence forms the tennis court perimeter.
Okay,
And-
that's responsive to my question. I wanted to know whether it was merely the chain link fence
No, it's the
that could have
granite.
been moved up to where.
It's the granite.
Okay, but it only talks of a chain link fence there. There's no evidence that there was any granite.
Because they had pulled it out.
So where it says on this plan, it says dirt and then it says chain link. Is there any granite along that
The chain
surface?
link, there is granite,
The
yes.
chain link fence, the poles of the chain link fence are set in granite.
You got it right smack dab in the middle of the granite.
So this should say chain link in
Okay,
granite.
that's what I was asking.
That's, yeah.
Thank you.
So
for
there is
that.
granite right on that dark
Yeah.
line.
So you're saying that it would cost $33,000 to remove the granite along the rear line, which is what? This is Town Line Road, so what are we looking at? That's
South.
the east, south line, the south side of the tennis court. To remove the granite,
Can I walk, go ahead?
yeah, sure, under the chain link. And then to move the chain link forward to where the dirt, the
We put
other
dirt-
side of the dirt.
We put dirt here to hopefully make pervious that it would
I understand
suffice.
that.
It doesn't. So now you have a 1 inch granite, a 1 foot wide granite that goes from this, it goes around the entire tennis court.
Right,
But in order to come back to lot coverage, we would have to then take all of this granite and cut it down to 8 inches. Because that's what it would add up to.
well, hang on a minute, so there are two issues, one is the lot coverage and the other is the setback. So theoretically, dealing only with the setback and
Yes.
not with the lot coverage, you wouldn't have to touch the granite.
Yes.
Except at the southerly length of granite, which theoretically, if it were removed and the chain link fence moved north to the front, the north edge of where the dirt is, that would take care of the setback.
Wouldn't do it, it would, well, yes, but it'd have to move that whole piece 22 inches back toward,
I think that's what I'm saying.
Yes.
You could move the southerly line of the tennis court. You've
Yes.
already cut out the concrete, the tennis court surface
yes,
and have dirt. So you could remove the granite north on the southerly end of the tennis court and move the chain link fence up to the northerly side of the dirt instead of the southerly side of the dirt and be in compliance on second.
I would just,
But you'd still have
We still have the coverage issue,
you'd still have a minor coverage issue, which is
Yes.
what percentage?
0.3%.
Okay, so you would eliminate a more significant increase in nonconformity and a reduced rear yard setback, and you would perhaps then have a better case for the rear yard coverage, which is relatively small, 0.3%. You're looking puzzled. You understand what I'm saying, or you just think that the idea is not palatable?
I think the idea is not.
I think that, I guess I don't really understand what you're saying.
What I'm saying is, I think you could eliminate the rear yard setback issue merely by removing the southerly concrete wall and moving the chain link fence up to the southerly end of the tennis court where it currently is located. That eliminates the
Yeah,
setback.
but at what expense? That's the point we're talking about.
So it's the expense of
Versus
removing the
advantage
granite.
Yeah.
request being made, you know.
but you said that there's $33,000. I'm trying to identify what that covers. There is the removal of a granite wall that's how high? 2 feet?
No, it's not a wall, by the way. It's just a granite
How
slab
high is it?
set as approved, level with the tennis court.
It's like a
It's level with the tennis court.
It's like a
It's
coping,
coping.
it's like coping,
Thank you.
it's coping.
And the fence is right on top
All
of
right,
it,
so
if
we'll call it a coping. If
Yeah.
removing the southerly granite coping
Yes,
into which the chain link fence is currently set,
yes,
and moving that up to the northerly edge of where the dirt is shown now, instead of it remaining on the southerly edge of the dirt, would eliminate the setback issue.
yes.
Can I ask a question, the follow-on question?
Tim, can you sit down? There's
If
too
we,
many
if we move, if that were to be done, move that bit of coping, does that make it a non-conforming size for tennis court, or is it still a valid?
It's still gonna be a non-conforming.
Well done.
No,
No, non-conforming under the rules of the USTA.
I'll stay out of it.
Thank you.
Whatever the United States Tennis Association rule.
No, the court's still the same.
There's a sufficient back
Oh.
court there that.
So this is not an issue of rendering it too small to be a tennis court.
Playability.
No, it would not.
Okay. All right, so was the cost that you cited, the $33,500 to accomplish what I just described, or something else?
Well, it accomplishes both the coverage issue and the rear yard setback. If you're saying you could remove a piece of the coping in one portion to somehow accommodate the setback as the lot goes further along, we didn't do an analysis of the entire width of the
Okay.
tennis court. But from an aesthetic perspective, you're just cutting out portions.
You could
of the coping.
reinstall the granite coping
Will break.
farther forward on
Will
the
break.
south end.
The way it's put in, it's leaded in with pipe and everything, they'll crack. And something that's also is the way that court is tipped, that's where the edge drain is buried underneath to relieve the water.
But now you were only talking about removing the granite coping up to where the dotted line is in the rear yard in order to conform to the lot coverage. So you are already saying that you can remove the coping. Well,
No, at the cost of $33,000.
no, yes, but
Yeah, we're not talking, the money is second. We're talking about what's mechanically feasible,
But it is.
because we're gonna have money later.
We've conceded it's feasible at a cost.
Okay,
But
but
that
the
cost
cost you
is a
cited.
burden, that cost is a burden to the applicant. And this board's, and
Yes, and-
your counsel will advise you that your objectives are to balance burden versus detriment.
And I'm trying to determine the burden. You cited a number, $33,500, and I'm trying to determine what that is for. It's not just for removing the coping along the southerly edge of the tennis court so that you could eliminate the rear yard setback. It also includes the cost of eliminating the coping or reducing its height for the remainder of the rear yard in order to eliminate the 0.3% overage of lot coverage. So what percentage of the $33,500 is attributable to A, eliminating the rear yard setback, and what percentage of the $33,000 is attributable to eliminating the rear yard lot coverage? That's what I'm trying to ascertain. I don't think I could be any clearer.
So
You may not know that, but I mean, it's just a question I'm asking.
I don't think there's a distinction. I think that's the quote is to remove granite and fencing on south side of the tennis court, install new granite and fencing 5 feet north on south end of tennis court. It's $33,572. There seems to be an understanding that we could remove a portion or a corner of the granite, and that would accommodate the setback. Is that your understanding? Is that what you're saying?
Well, I don't think you have adequate information before us to make an informed decision. Because I'm getting a gross number of 33.5. It's not clear what that encompasses. I can't tell whether there is a lesser solution, perhaps a compromise available, where you bring the tennis court into compliance with respect to the rear yard setback, the rear yard setback, because now you're increasing a degree of nonconformity, which you're not supposed to do. Whereas the overage of the rear yard lot coverage is pretty minimal, and maybe that could not have to be complied with. How much would that thereby reduce the $33,500?
I feel like it's, maybe I'm misunderstanding this, I feel like it's the same job would
It's
be
the
done.
same job.
The
That's why I
same
don't
job would be
understand.
done regardless
No,
of
it's
what
not.
they're.
Because he's talking about reducing the granite, what we're calling it coping,
Right.
on both the east and west sides of the property, as well as the south side of the property. And I'm saying, suppose you were to just take care of the south side of the property to bring the rear yard setback into
That's gonna
compliance.
increase the amount that we have to move in a northerly direction, because when we calculated the 0.3%, it wasn't just taking the granite and coming back to the nonconformity. Then it began to start from the line, the bisecting red line on the south side, all the way around, the east side, the west side, the south side, and back to the west
So now you
side.
get it, now you understand what I've been asking.
And we would have had to reduce them in kind, which means they're gonna be different than the rest of the court. So then in order to do it, you have to even come further back.
It's gonna be different anyway, because if you're only changing that coping up to the dotted red line, then what about the coping around the north side of the tennis court that's not in the rear yard? That's not gonna be changed?
No, we stay there, and then we wind up with an asymmetrical court off of the net, okay?
But that's what you said you were gonna do. You said that you were only going to reduce the coping on the south side of the dotted red line in order to eliminate the lot coverage.
No, they said they were only going to shrink it on the most southerly line. I never heard them mention east and west.
No, there are two issues.
Is that
Maybe I'm
true?
not understanding this at all, but I think I am. There is a coping that surrounds the entire tennis court.
Yes,
Yes.
That portion of it, which is north of the dotted red line, is okay, doesn't have to be touched.
that's true.
In order to solve two problems, one, the rear yard setback, you need to move the south end of the tennis court further north. In order to eliminate the rear yard overage, the lot coverage, you have to do more than just moving the southern end of the tennis court north. You have to get rid of some of the coping south of the dotted red line.
Yeah,
So there'll be an asymmetry around the court anyway, because you will have the higher coping north of the dotted red line and a lower coping or no coping south of the
not
line.
high or low, different width.
It would be the width
Different
of
widths.
the
Can
Wait,
I ask a question? If you're only gonna do one thing, you're gonna move the south end coping 1.2 feet.
That's what we're doing, yes. That accommodates both the lot coverage and the setback.
Okay, so that instead of being to the south of the line marked dirt, it's on the line marked dirt.
Exactly
correct?
right. That costs $33,000.
Okay, so that's what costs
And
33,000.
accommodates both. Without doing that, we don't. we
Okay,
need
and
setback
if
relief,
you do that, you satisfy you get to the prior nonconformity.
That's exactly right.
And you get rid of the 0.6% over.
That's right. At a cost of 33.
So there's only one mechanical step, which is move that line.
Dotted line.
Okay. And that you say is what's cost 33,000.
That's right.
So in the 33,000 is nothing else.
That's it.
But does that cover the drainage? Like, what is this court made out of? Is this hard true? Is this all weather?
Okay, this is a asphalt base court. Underneath that end is a trough drain that feeds off into the
I'm sorry, what's the material of the
eastern
court?
side.
Asphalt,
The court
all
itself,
weather.
the court surface itself, we imported it from England. It's a special turf and it's infilled with sand. And there's a whole leaching system underneath it that collects it all. It's extremely expensive.
Is that gonna disturb the court at all by moving it? forward, the fencing?
Well, that's why we're asking for the
That's what we're
variance.
asking.
No, she's asking about the drainage.
Yeah, is,
Well, that would be, that would also need.
Everything has to be moved.
Yeah, that's why
Yeah.
it gets so expensive.
That's part of the 33,000.
Yeah.
What my question, which I think has been clarified, is I had the impression that just eliminating the coping up to the dirt was insufficient to solve the rear yard coverage. I wanted to know how much farther north
Oh,
the
now I
coping is
understand.
gonna be affected. That's where I was looking.
I'm
for
sorry, that was a
clarification.
confusion
Because I was trying to see whether there's a way to bring one of them into compliance
without needing.
at a lesser cost, without having to go further north with the coping to solve the lot cut.
Okay, I appreciate that.
All right, so the 33,005 takes care of, would be, if you were to do it, would take care of removing the existing coping and chain link fence, moving it north to where the northerly edge of the dirt is, and reinstalling coping at that location and fence. And that would take care of the drainage as well.
That's right.
Okay. How much did it cost to build the court altogether with this expensive turf?
It's $165,000.
Well, that puts the $35,000 in correcting the error to some extent in perspective. Just while it's on my mind, you claim that this is not a self-created hardship. The builder is the owner's agent. It is a self-created hardship.
Well, it's an unintentional self.
Okay, but it's
No, but that's an appropriate distinction.
legally, it's a self-created hardship if it's an act of your agent, even if it's inadvertent.
I disagree.
It's not like, hey, if there was stone under, if there was granite in one end of the court, that's no, that's an act of God or whatever, an act of creation. This is somebody that works for the owner who made a mistake.
Yes, yes.
And
we're
you
trying
think,
to-
and we should be in the business of forgiving that?
Well,
I think, yes.
it
I think
depends.
that's a fair thing to consider.
I don't think it's a yes or no answer. It depends on all of the circumstances, and that's what we're trying to get at. But if
I
the
think-
owner had built the court and made the mistake, would that be a self-created hardship?
I think there is a level of intent when you're talking about a self-created hardship. Did you build something, what they're talking about with that condition? Did you create a structure that would force you, if you want to do something else, to get a variance? Did you locate something in one location that if you want a pool, you can only put it there with a variance? A mistake, I have not seen case law that has found that as a mistake.
Okay, well, that was the question I'm asking.
Can I ask, this is sort of a legal question though, if we were to agree with you, aren't we encouraging owners and their agents to
Mistakenly.
make mistakes, to not do their work, to the white heart, empty head standard, right? So, yeah, I acted in good faith. I didn't do any research. I didn't take out my tape measure. I just made a mistake and I should be forgiven for that.
It's not about whether you're encouraging people to do right or wrong. It's about the standards that you're empowered to uphold. Look at the benefit versus the detriment. This was a legitimate mistake. I understand your concern. There could be an illegitimate mistake that someone is trying to get. Would someone really go through all this to get another foot?
I guess probably not, but I think the problem, maybe the stumbling block is that because what we're actually doing is increasing a variance. Right, so if this had been, a non-conformity, so if somebody had brought this to us without anything, we would have said, well, it's increasing the non-conformity, we don't want to do that at any cost because it's already non-conforming, so I think that's where again, not distrusting or saying anybody's not doing due diligence, but I think that's why it becomes a little bit more complicated, is because of the pre-existing non-conformity, even though it's a foot and a half. Like you brought out the thing on Town Line Road of giving a variance, but they didn't have, or maybe they did have a previous non-conformity there.
But they asked for one.
Right.
And
Right.
to a greater degree
And we
than
gave,
this.
and we, exactly,
And you
we do on tennis courts, you've probably noted.
Okay, so,
Which I'm against.
first of all, there's no punitive intent here. We're trying to ascertain facts,
Yeah, and
because
this was-
as you said, it's a balance, right? And it is relevant to determine whether it was an intentional self-created hardship or an unintentional self-created hardship. And it is relevant to determine whether it's an increase in a nonconformity that is significant or not, and whether the lot coverage is significant or not, and how much it would cost, and we're just asking the questions so that we can make a reasoned decision here. I'm sorry if I was overly difficult about trying to ascertain facts.
You weren't, it was a miscommunication.
Yeah, I didn't
I'm
understand.
sorry that
No,
I wasn't following.
well.
Next time we want a
Unfortunately,
we need
it's-
a 3D model.
It took longer, but it's been clarified. We now understand that the $33,500 cures both nonconformities, the rear yard lot coverage and the rear yard setback. And that the reason for both is due to a builder's error based upon, I'm still not completely clear on that. You said that you were replacing the tennis court at the same location as the prior tennis court, but measured out from the net.
The net post was set when they resurfaced it. We left the basement material and stripped the top material.
Yeah.
The post locations were there, okay? And then
Yeah.
simply, I mean, I'll give it to you in simple black and white. Nobody thought about the fact that there was a coping going on.
Okay, so the net was in the same place, the court was in the same place, and it's the coping.
And then
That
we
caused it
trimmed
to-
it to the original size and added coping.
Okay.
And that's how it happened. And it just was as my dad would say, this is why there's erasers on pencils.
Okay, fair enough. I mean, nobody's perfect and mistakes are made, but we do have to deal with consequences, and that's why you're here. All right, so is there anything further that you want to present about this thing? I think I've got a picture of it now. Anybody else? Questions? No questions?
I would reiterate, this was a legitimate mistake. There is no testimony.
Well, it was just explained.
Yeah.
So, and by the way, your other point was relevant too. I was thinking about this before. We had an applicant who bought a property for like $10 to $12 million. And they were raising everything. They were tearing down the pool house, and they were tearing down the house, and they were tearing out everything on the property except for a liner swimming pool. If somebody's gonna build a $20 million house or a $10 million house on a $10 million lot, and they're leaving the liner swimming pool, it's kind of preposterous.
So they-
Why? Because that would enable them to then be able to put the tennis court next to the swimming pool in a required side yard setback.
Saying.
Needless to say, we
have to
do.
move the pool. They don't make us move the pool.
Right.
That's
You don't
that's
have
a
that.
self-created hardship.
You don't have that here. There is no reason that that tennis court was extended to the south in order to create some area to the north for a pool house or something else.
Exactly.
Okay, so I see that it was in all likelihood unintentional, because nothing was gained by doing it. That I can see there was no advantage gained by doing it. So I'm satisfied that we have all the information, and we'll have to decide what to do. Now, my only question is whether we should leave the hearing open in case there's any new information that anyone thinks should be produced after we discuss this, and give you the opportunity to put in additional information. If we close the hearing,
Do you have a written comment period? Do you guys close with written comment?
we sometimes close the hearing so that there's no more testimony, and then we agree to accept additional written material for another like 10 days, or at least up until like 10 days before the next meeting. I would be curious to see the estimates for the cost that you just told us about. If you
Yeah, I
have
can-
that now,
I
you
can give that to you
now.
Sure.
Anything else that anybody else can think of? Any reason to hold the hearing open? Think we're gonna have any more questions for them?
For me.
All right, then I would entertain a motion. Well, let's get this paper in the record. This is an estimate from your company or the?
No, this is from the landscape contractor that's been on the project.
Landscape company. Okay. So these are the estimates. I will just, for the record, it's dated February 10th, so it's very fresh. It's from Land Tech. And it does cite a price of $33,572. to remove granite and fencing on the south side of the tennis court. Install new granite and fencing 5 feet north on the south end of the tennis court. And we've got multiple copies for them, that's it, okay. And this is the company that did the landscaping for the whole property?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right, we'll put this in the record.
I have one in the record.
You have it in, okay. All right, then I'll entertain a motion to,
If you add it all up, we'll be at 44 grand.
That wasn't sufficient.
Just.
So it didn't matter what it was called.
It's because there's a difference between two people.
I know I'm never putting it in.
is there an errors and omissions policy of the contractor that installed this? Who will bear the cost if the correction is required, the owner or the contractor?
Or it's split.
The landscape for this
Be
company?
determined by Mr.
We
Pendergast.
haven't had those conversations yet. I'm sure there will be a discussion, but you know, the contractor can argue my job isn't to look at setbacks. They point to the surveyor and the surveyor could say, I didn't put, you know, there's gonna be a lot of finger pointing. if it
You know,
goes
I
that
understand that.
We even had a switch of surveyors in between this, and
Yeah, it's a lot of aggravation over a relatively small element of a rather large project. I'm accustomed to dealing with those myself, and it's very frustrating, but it is what it is, you know, we have to. Okay. All right, well, listen, thank you for the presentation. I will entertain a motion to close the hearing.
I'll make a motion.
Second, all in favor? Aye. All right. We will close the hearing and
Decision that next.
we've got 62 days to render a decision, which means we can either do it in March or April. We'll try not to delay it.
All right, thank you very much.
thank you, take care.
Thanks. Now, do we adjourn the meeting before we just deliberate on this? So the next order of business, there being no further business at this meeting, will be I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Meeting's adjourned, recording is off.
Not yet.